Hello, listeners. This is David Blakesley coming at you with a special podcast episode. Not the kind of thing I've done a lot of. I've done a few interviews over the years, but I'm not here to talk about a particular movie. This is not part of my regular Criterion Reflections or even my Eclipse Viewer podcasting thing that some of you who listen may know me from. I am here to talk to a good friend, Aaron West, about a book that is on the verge of publication. Aaron, yes, that's definitely great to connect with you today in kind of a different situation than what we've become accustomed to. We've been friends for about 10 years now, maybe a little longer than that. I think our first collaboration online was back in 2015 when we were
Wow.
doing stuff with Criterion Cast, and you had your, Criterion Close Up, later Criterion Now. You've been on my program, I've been on yours, and we've been guests
Mhm.
on episodes hosted by other people. But I am here to interview you as an author at this point, and it's pretty exciting to see this project, which I've known about for the last couple of years as you've been working on it. But we are right on the verge of launching this thing into the real world. What's been a interesting possibility is now becoming a tangible reality. So happy to talk to you this morning about your upcoming book, the A24 New Wave.
Thanks, David. Yeah, it is a little surreal just talking to you. Again, we've talked, as you said, so many times about so many different topics, and all of them have been wonderful. But yeah, could not have conceived that I'd be in this seat, in this place with this big of a, like you said, tangible product here in 10 years later. But it's really been born out of love and a love of cinema and a love of creating. I've built a lot of things. A book is just one of them, but it's one of my life accomplishments at this point. I'm very proud of it, and I'm very happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, yeah, no, you've put together the Cinema Journeys website, you and your business partner, Jill Blake, also another very gifted podcaster and friend that I've not maybe spent as much time with, but certainly appreciate what she brings to the conversation. So let's just get right into it. You've done a lot of things. We've talked a lot of stuff about the Criterion Collection in particular. This is taking a look at a current studio that's out there producing, distributing A24. Tell us just a little bit about your interest in A24 and how this project came into being.
Yeah, well, we have some shared history with where this originated. So, I've always been a film buff. I tend to be lean classic cinema, but of course I like all cinema. I like the new stuff, and the weird thing is we are what the term has become Criterion Bros, and in some circles that is a derogatory term, and I've seen some of that just from social media. I have seen maybe the downside of the Criterion Bro moniker, but I honestly I think that going through another person, we haven't just watched Criterion. I've just consumed all of classic film, try to watch all the Sight and Sound 250, trying to get through like the filmmaker, the library of say Chantal Ackerman or Bergman. Of course, those two have been on Criterion, but and of course, even just by looking at the label, they put out modern films, current films, especially in recent years, but really since the IFC deal in like 2008, 2009.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but but I always watch that. I love award season. I love watching foreign films. I just love film. But as I guess just as the post pandemic era, the cinema changed and kind of evolved as far as distribution and home releases and VOD and that sort of thing. I guess I got to see more. I love going to the theaters, but it is more convenient with more being available to you. And of course, I've watched A24 films since the very beginning, including Spring Breakers. And I just noticed that the films that I love, the influences that we've talked about several times, they're all present in this new group of filmmakers. So actually, I started with two podcast episodes with my old co-host Mark Herney,
Mhm.
and then Rodney Wade, good friend, also a member of Synergies. And I just basically bounced off of the idea of the A24 New Wave, and just to see if it held water, and they thought it did. And so I just got to researching, and I've done some long form writing before, but nothing like this. And yeah, now we have actually two books coming out, the one this year and one next. So it's
Yeah, yeah, let's dig into that a little bit because yeah, A24, I mean, as I think probably a lot of people who would be listening to this podcast knows, have been a very successful kind of trendsetter, very influential. They have become a studio brand that people will go see. Oh, a new A24 is coming out. Yeah, let's go check it out. So they've built that kind of trust based on a strong track record of challenging, engaging, artistically creative films from a variety of filmmakers. It's not just a small handful, but maybe just tell us a little bit about what is A24. A lot of people might know the brand more than they know the structure or the organization behind it. So, yeah, let's kind of get familiar with some of the details, some of the things that you've discovered about how they're organized and how they go about doing their business.
Well, that's I also have a historian background or history background, so I did approach it with, through film appreciation, film studies, but also looking at the history, and they're really a kind of enigmatic organization. The three founders found it's named after an Italian freeway highway, Autostrada 24, that goes through Rome and to the coast. Actually, kind of cuts in half the continent there, goes from one end to the other, or not the continent, but the country, the arpeggio. um, and um, and so they were part of the indie scene. They had origins in think film, oscilloscope. There's a Beastie Boys connection too with oscilloscope. In fact, a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
interesting and fun connection, which I go through in the book. Um, but yeah, they were just a distributor that had kind of, I don't want to say stumbled on, but they had really, with oscilloscope, they had learned some marketing techniques that you really need to get independent film seen. And there have been probably thousands of distributors in the history of film, and they were one, and they had some good timing too. But they just were bold. They started acquiring films, and to answer your, and then eventually they, of course, they reached a lot of success fairly early, actually, and then they started producing films, and they've grown from there. So the timing has been, their social media. So to go back to your original question about what is
Yeah.
A24, it's what you make of it. I mean, it's a brand, and it's out there. There's 200 films or so. They're all sorts of genres. There's horror. They're very well known for their horror. There's drama. One thing that we hear a lot, or I've found a lot, is human stories. So even within their horror, there tend to be a lot of character depth. Um, Now the thing is, A24 is still a production company, a distributor, a cultural conglomerate is what we call them, and what a
Mm.
source that I use in the book calls it. So it's really all things. It's not really one thing. Just a history of making, I'd say, quality films. Not entirely. There are some clunkers, but the big thing is empowering auteurs, and that's where the new wave comes from. Is that kind of like the auteurs that would appear on the Criterion Collection, or in just classic film, that just the auteur theory. That that has become basically their central operating practice, is championing auteurs.
Yeah. Let's build on that whole new wave concept. Obviously, anybody who's even beginning to become what they might consider a cinephile will maybe become familiar with the Nouvelle Vague, the French New Wave. Maybe
Right.
that was the not the original New Wave in terms of the earliest, but it was the movement within the French cinema scene that kind of coined that phrase, and that New Wave has been applied to uh, you know, film movements in all kinds of different countries, and yet here we are with the American film industry dominated by Hollywood, of course, although there's been an indie thing happening for decades now. New waves tend to happen when there's kind of a perception of kind of calcification or kind of fussiness or rigidity within the existing scene, and new waves break out. They shake things up. They question the traditions and maybe spark some controversy, but they are also often associated with young people, an upcoming generation finding its voice. What led you to think of A24? We've had other indies and
Of
studio
course, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
uprisings and of different sorts. You think about Miramax back in the '90s and others, but what is it that makes A24 a new wave per se?
So yeah, one thing that people probably do not realize, and you probably remember, it seems like forever ago, but there was at one point a show that we wanted to do on Criterion Cast called Waves. Do you remember
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
discussion?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Ryan wanted to build it at one point, and then I wanted to build it, and just nobody had time, so it didn't get built. But it was going to be like a podcast season. Uh, 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 Seasons about a new wave era, so would have been a lot of fun. But
Mhm.
I'm fascinated by new wave movements, and of course, this is all in the book. French New Wave, Nouvelle Vague. Yes, they are the I guess the new wave originators. Although I do go prior to that. There were some inner Hollywood new wave movements. There's British
Mhm.
social realism is a big one as well. I talk about that, and really that's from the post-war period, and really beginning with Humphrey Jennings, the documentarian during the war, making propaganda films. So yeah, I do talk about all of those, but you're right. They are often young, and they are often reacting to something. There's sometimes there's economic upheaval, political upheaval, and sometimes it's just a frustration with the medium, and that's where the youth movements come into play, especially with the French New Wave, because they often hated the films that came before them. And we were seeing a lot of the same elements in the post Miramax period. I'll say post, even though A24 was concurrent with the end of Miramax and the Weinstein Company, and of course that's a big topic that we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it we discuss it in the book.
Yeah. Sure.
But there was a big independent commercial movement within the studios. So Miramax, of course, and then there were a lot of these sub labels for the studios like Fox Searchlight, Sony Pictures Classics, Focus Features, of course, and they all brought a lot of great films to cinemas. Like for example, Lost in Translation, I think is a great film. I believe that was Focus Features by Coppola, and of course
Mhm.
Coppola is a very much became a part of A24. There was also Dogma 95, the Danish movement. There was Mumblecore, which is one of those movements that the filmmakers, well, at least some of the filmmakers didn't exactly like, and it wasn't something they didn't have any manifesto. And it's not something they endeavored to belong to a movement, but it's in the work. Of course, it fizzled out because they all moved on to other things. So there's kind of a hyper realism. There's also a democratic. I can't really enunciate today. I'm sorry. Democratization of like film techniques. Of course, with technology, digital cameras, which I wish I got into more in the book, but I touch on it a little bit. So of course, it becomes easier for people to make films. And so yeah, A24 took a chance on auteurs, and for example, the early years, Harmony Korine, of course, is the first one, but we have Robert Eggers is a big one, Ari Aster, both genre but not genre filmmakers. Then sometimes they were accidental, like for example, Yorgos Lanthimos. They got The Lobster by accident. Really, it was a fire sale, and there
Wow.
was yeah, of course, Alex Garland is a big one. Uh, um, Jonathan Glazer is a big one, Under the Skin. So
Yep.
these are challenging movies and high art in a lot of cases. But of course, the films are a business. They can the new wave movements. They have to be able to find financing to get their film seen, to get these chances. So the other prior movements, whether it was state cinema or or they had some financing elsewhere. The British they had their own kind of organized financing, and then Woodfall, of course, was their film company. So A24 is basically I wouldn't call them like a Medici to Michelangelo, but they had the business savvy to be able to put together, a catalog of high quality films, and they also were smart. They innovated through different, the rise of streaming. They made a couple deals early on, some of which they learned from, some of which actually turned out to be great for them. So yeah, they're a very wise company that has grown to become really. I think they surpassed indie film. They're now, in fact, Marty Supreme. I would not call it an indie film. It's a high budget, high box office, and a very buzzy movie that might win an Oscar for a
Mhm.
young actor. Um, and then just to close that, regarding the generations, they often organized movements often are the same group of friends. Cahiers de Cinema, of course, was basically not exclusively the same age, but basically the same social circle, which
Mm.
whereas that has actually kind of evolved with A24. There are a lot of Gen X millennial filmmakers, and then lately we've seen a lot of younger people enter that, and their target market is very very young. You know, kind of the Zoomer, maybe like younger millennials. But yeah, no, it's been a very very fun topic, and I do get into the history of those new wave movements throughout the book, and they're not always the same. So they're
Right.
not all Citizen Kane, you know.
Yeah, but there is a social component. This isn't just a bunch of people in a studio pumping out product.
Right.
There's a culture that kind of builds around it. You know, there's a discourse. There's, emerging personalities. You think back again to the French New Wave. You've got Godard, Truffaut, but
Yeah.
you've got Belmondo. You've got Anna Karina. You've got the other stars and personalities that kind of round out the whole picture. And then there's the art, the visuals, the craft, the technical stuff, and also the messages. And what I'm really looking forward to is in your book is how you kind of just touch on all those topics. So let's just talk a little bit about the structure of the book. This isn't just a collection of short take movie reviews. Like you've already
No.
talked about the culture, the personalities, what was happening in the larger film culture around the release, and how these films became influential to what the big studios were doing or what was happening overseas. So yeah, just tell us a little bit more about the structure of the book and how you put it all together.
Yeah, it's a pretty big book, and I wrote it with the intention of it being read cover to cover, and I think that's still the best way to read it. But it's not necessary. You can jump around from topic to topic because there's really, I'd say, three threads throughout the book. So there's the history of the A24 as a company, and I do get into their origins, some of their success. They found a lot of success at award season, so I get into that kind of borrowing from Miramax, but not exactly, you know, using their own kind of viral methods. There's also the historical context, and I do talk about, of course, the new wave movements that we just touched on, and then throughout the book, I bring up, you know, the historical context of the filmmakers that actually influenced this modern group, and I found that there's a lot of commonality. Just the comment I made at the last answer, you know, about Citizen Kane. Of course, Citizen Kane is pretty well beloved, but there was an overlapping set of influences, and for example, Cassavetes comes up very very frequently, as does like Mike Lee and a lot of the British socialists, even Tony Richardson. So
Mm.
a lot more than that. So I try to drop that historical context in. So it's in a way it's kind of like film school through the lens of A24, but then my favorite part of the book, honestly, is the stories. So I wanted to dig into these directors. There's just not a lot being written about modern film and modern filmmakers. I really couldn't find a whole lot of sources about
Hmm.
or books about these filmmakers. And I'm not saying that this is the book about an individual filmmaker, but the chapters are pretty meaty. And you know, for example, I think my favorite chapter is either probably Eggers or Astor. I just really interesting people and how they approach cinema and their brand of cinema. Also how they work with actors. Yeah, and then of course Barry Jenkins, you know, the whole Moonlight thing. I get into
Hmm.
that. Greta Gerwig. A lot of these filmmakers became titans. So I kind of
Yeah.
go through each one, and I am touching on the new wave and their influences and how they came to be, and each chapter kind of builds on each other as the company grows and as we see more filmmakers kind of joining this what I'm calling a movement. Um, but it's really the stories and their career trajectory that I think is the most fun. It was the most fun to write about. So we have Greta Gerwig goes from mumblecore to Barbie, and yes, by kind of and with you know Noah Baumbach's relationship, and of course Lady Bird is the intersection with A24 and also White Noise. So that's you know it's a longer chapter. It's more about Greta Gerwig, whereas Robert Eggers, of course, he has two movies with A24. Ari Aster has four, which two of which are in this book, Midsummer and Hereditary. And so getting into you know how Ari Aster conceived and made Hereditary, and also how people reacted to it without any expectations. They just knew it was a horror film at Sundance, and some of the reactions to that were a lot of fun. But then, of course, he then turns around to make Midsummer, which had already been you know brewing for you. You can't just make a movie like that in 6 months.
Right. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but there was also a cutoff. I
Mhm.
towards the end of 2018, I mean, the company and this group of filmmakers had reached such heights. You know, they had Oscars, they had a lot of box office success, very much prominent and permeated the pop culture stratosphere, viral all over the place. Midsummer alone is everywhere,
Mhm.
and then of
Mhm.
course the pandemic happens, and Parasite happens, and I think really Parasite and the pandemic changed a lot of things, obviously, but cinema especially. So A24 had to adapt. You know, they got some projects moving. Ty West's X trilogy, that'll be in the second book, but they also focus more on representation and inclusivity, and that's really what the second book is all about. Is how it's called the A24 New Normal. Most of it is
Mm.
written. About maybe three quarters is already written, and I'll be adding some more later this year to talk about a different set of influences like Chantal Ackerman, Barbara Loden, Lizzie Borden, many of which came out on
Mhm.
Criterion. Some haven't.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. But and then of course they have been imitated. I shouldn't say imitated. They have been they have influenced other labels like
Mhm.
Neon, especially. Neon is a big fish right now, and Mubi and others like it. Even Oscilloscope has grown. So yeah, it's been a large project, but a lot of fun. And I think the directors, that's where bouncing around helps. You know, if somebody wants to read about Robert Eggers, there's a lot there. I think you'll enjoy it.
So it's kind of good reference material if you're kind of looking to do a deeper dive and collect sort of the story of some of these well-known names and personalities you referenced. How'd you go about acquiring all or accumulating all this information? I imagine you did interviews, research. Just tell us a little bit about your sort of making of process, if you don't mind.
The process is pretty extensive. I've spent a lot of time. Well, first off, you have to watch everything. You have to, and multiple times. So I watched every A24 film, and at this point, I think the cutoff is around 190 films, really for all both editions. You know, really up to this point, 190 and change. I think they're going to cross over 200 this in 2026. So a lot of reading. I got to say, there's a lot of fantastic online journalism, and these filmmakers like to talk about. That's a big part
Yeah.
of their promotion. And some of them say the same thing every interview. I not, I mean, they have their talking points, but they also. Well, what I found is some of the interviews, they really there was a comfort level. So if you see one chapter where one interview is cited more than others, that's just because that's where the artist, the creator, revealed more, and so that was more more meat for my book. But yeah, I watched all the movies. I read almost all the screenplays that are available, publicly available. I read a lot of books. So, for example, Jenny Slate is a big part of the book. So she's written her own books. Very interesting and unique writer, but has a very obviously she's a comedian, so humorous perspective on the world. Also an advocate too, or activist, I should say. But mostly focus on fun and comedy. She's a very silly person that loves fart jokes. So I read her books, read it out, the adaptations. So for example, Under the Skin and Enemy. I read the Double by Jose Saramago, I think is the way it's pronounced, who is a great postmodern author. Really tough book. I got to say, I loved it, but I found one interview where somebody just couldn't get through it, and I'm sure
Mm.
that's pretty common. So yeah, I would guess we tried to quantify it because these days there's just so much out there. So I would guess probably 2,000, 3,000 sources. That includes, of course, the trades. There are a lot of press releases about all these films, and I quote a lot of those. A lot of it's out there publicly, but as I found, it takes you a couple of years to compile them. So it's been a fun process. I'm actually kind of enjoying watching movies for myself again. So even though
Yeah.
I've loved
Yeah.
all these movies and it's been a wonderful experience, I kind of want to catch up on the Oscars and maybe get into some classic film again. But yeah, no, very exhausting, painstaking, lots of note taking. You should see my notes are insane, but
Yeah. Well,
it's fun.
it seems like a very very impressive effort and dedication, and I think, yeah, hopefully just to clear up any impressions people thought that this might just be kind of a kind of a almost like a blog in book form. No, this is
No, yeah,
beyond
no,
that, and I'm very excited to sort of get access to that. Now, anybody watching this on video sees some artwork behind you. Let's talk a
right.
little bit about some of the packaging and the presentation of the material. Tell us who's behind that.
Yeah, so, our good friend, or actually, I think she's your good friend, but I don't know. But, Caitlin Kuwald, and in fact, I have a postcard right here. This is her
Mm,
art, and that's our Cinejourneys, website. If you're watching on video, you can see that it's part of the background here as well. She designed the book cover, and then we had a Kickstarter, earlier 2025, around January, February. We commissioned 3, or 4 other paintings. Actually, there's, Third Eye, Midsummer, and Sacramento. So they are, of course, related to A24 films. So yeah, that was some Kickstarter merch that we offered, and yeah, I have the art prints behind me, just amazing. I'm moving over so you can see the May Queen. So since I'm blocking it, but yeah, and I have a tote of the Third Eye that is every time I go out, like I get just such compliments. They're like, such amazing
yeah,
detail. And the Midsummer, I have a kind of a purple Midsummer May Queen shirt, I get probably, if I'm out in public, maybe, like, I'm not exaggerating, maybe like 15 comments a day. It's just such a striking image. So that's been fun too. And that's a part of A24 is the merch. So we did not enter this project to compete with A24's in terms of merch. This was
right.
intended for artwork for the book, and it should be in the book. But of course, this first book is black and white. Hopefully, one day we might be able to do a color. But but yeah, it's been lovely to have our own, kind of branding, I guess, lack of a better word, for the book, which is these 4. And the other one is, Black Phillip. I don't have an art print. It's a great print. The only thing is it's a goat, so it's not really
Yeah.
identifiable as the film, but it's still a lovely work of art that Caitlin's going to also illustrate the A24 New Normal. We're talking about covers right now that I can't talk about, and there's another project that we'll probably be announcing in the summer that we're also talking about that, and that's gonna be pretty interesting. That's just all I'm gonna say about that.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, let's maybe clarify just a little bit about the 2 books. I don't think you set out in this project to write 2 books. It was just gonna be, in fact, my understanding was that you were gonna do a book about A24.
right.
Obviously, you've referenced a lot of material, a lot of films, and my understanding is that the first volume, the one that's closest to publication, is gonna be kind of taking us right up to that COVID period. That's kind
Right,
of
yeah.
the natural dividing line, and I think that is. It is one of those kind of, forks in the road culturally along so many different levels. And yeah, just tell us a little bit about kind of how that decision came about, and kind of how you see this unfolding, timelines, when to expect volume 2 and all of that.
Sure. So the way this evolved is that I basically left my IT job in 2022, I believe it was. Yeah, I think it's 2022. And we have built this platform. We have online classes, as you've been a part of this. You did the Pasolini, and hopefully
Mhm.
some more in the future. But we
Yep.
have Imogen Sarah Smith, great scholar, Adrian Martin, who wrote the foreword. We just added Ty Burr, and lots of other, Matthew Ellis, Derek Smith, lots of great people. Christina Alvarez Lopez is about to join the platform. That's not a secret. Um, but really, the reason I did, yes, you're right. I did not endeavor to write 2 books. It's partly my inexperience with this formal publishing is that I did have some writing software that I use. No AI, by the way. When people hear about the length of in fact, I'm kind of disgusted by just the idea of this book as an AI book, because we'll just say that AI has a certain style that I'm not particularly a fan of. But I really did work. I had the time, so I am building this company. Basically, nights and week. I can nights, weekends. I can command my own schedule, or kind of um, put together my own schedule, and I just worked well. And by the time the Kickstarter started, I think I had 100,000 words, and my ignorance is I didn't realize that was essentially a full book. that's
Mhm.
that's publishable as a book. I think I had an idea, but I didn't know the limits to that. So I ended up, as I was preparing for publication here this year, I found that it was 250,000 words,
Mm.
which the
Wow.
way we have it structured, that would be a 1,000-page book. And that's where I did an interview with Jill, and then when I said 1,000 pages, the first thing she asked was about AI, and when you read it, you'll see it's not a word AI,
Mm.
but of course that's the environment we live in, so of course that's a perception. But yeah, I was just write fast, and I had a lot to say, and so we found that dividing line, and we also found that it's the risk I called out in the Kickstarter was that A24 is still active, and they have a very very fast pace, releasing maybe a dozen, sometimes more, sometimes less films per year. And at some point, I knew that I couldn't keep pace with them, and in fact, I didn't, because I was hoping that the dividing line would be around when Honora won Best Picture and all the other Oscars. But as it turns out, the dividing line for the second book is Marty Supreme. I just had to have a cutoff at some point, and and I also need a little more time to really give that its proper due too. That's too fresh. I did write a chapter about Eddington that I'm going to rewrite, because I think that movie needs a little bit of time too. So yeah, the release plans, we are the publication date is May for the A24 New Wave. It's already out there. If you go to cinejourneys.com/A24 book, you'll find it. There's also a digital access component with our website, but you'll see the press release, you'll see the pre-order links. Right now, when we're recording, it's we have it for pre-order, and it's on Kindle, a couple other places, and we'll be putting the actual book on the physical book on Amazon, and of course I'm not crazy about Amazon, especially I've seen the other side of how much they take from creators, so that's another topic, but it'll be everywhere. And the best place to find it, we'll constantly update Cine Journey's book. We'll put this A24 book. We'll put this conversation up there as well, so people can see the interviews and the press I'm doing. And yeah, and then the plans for the A24 New Normal are probably about this time next year. Spring, we're saying spring 2027. So we'll start getting into the editing and the finalization probably in the fall of this year. And yeah, and we'll have done a lot of the groundwork, so it should be easy. Not, I shouldn't say easy, but it shouldn't be as challenging as this. This is no Fitzcarraldo. It's like if Fitzcarraldo
Yeah.
two,
Yeah.
if Herzog
All
fans
right.
know that reference.
Sure. Absolutely. Hey, are there any other persons, people that you want to sort of give a shout out to? I know this has not just been a one man project. You've done a lot of the work, and I hats off to you for just like you say, that dedication, that focus, that perseverance to pull it all together. But I know you've had some other hands. Maybe want to give them a little bit of a mention as well.
Of course. Well, I already mentioned Caitlin, so
Yes.
you can judge a book by its cover, and I'm pretty happy with our cover.
Yeah.
But also just Caitlin's a great person, so a great collaborator, and one of the best decisions we made was working with her. So that's Caitlin Kuwald. I believe it's CaitlinKuwald.com. I believe it's CaitlinKuhl. Her name is tough to spell. And. So she's also been a Criterion artist, very very talented. Of course,
Yes.
my wife is an English professor, so she has a good taste in reading, and also very higher standard, high taste, and that was one part of this process, was her reading some of these chapters, and at some point she was like, I can't believe my husband wrote this. So that was a pretty high compliment.
Yeah.
And then
Sure.
I've had some great readers, so they're part of the Cine Journeys community. So, well, I mentioned Rodney as far as the video, and also Mark Herney as well. Mark
Mm.
hasn't been a reader, but I'm sure he will read. But Rodney, Joe, and Lewis were readers, and they gave me a lot of good feedback and encouragement. And sometimes when things didn't work, they would tell me, and I did really appreciate that. And then Wade Sheeler, who used to podcast with Jill, actually,
Yeah.
together, and he's worked on reality TV. He's super talented. He cut a trailer for us for the Kickstarter that was top notch, and we're hoping to involve him later. He has some other stuff going on, so we'll see. But there's more. There's an army of people, of course, all the Kickstarter backers. I have to shout out all the online writers. I cited so many wonderful people, and I can't wait for people to read it and see
Mhm.
how their quote kind of summarized or highlighted a chapter and made it special. So yeah, they'll get their flowers when it comes out. But yeah, wonderful people helped with this. indirectly or
So,
directly. Yeah.
well, this has been a pretty informative conversation. A lot of my curiosity has been satisfied, but are there any other points or details you want to bring into the conversation before we wrap things up?
Huh. Well, that's a big question. Yeah, it's just if you love cinema or and well, what I'll say as far as the target, I could have I am I should say I'm not an academic. I've gone to school, of course, but this is not an academic book. It's almost a mainstream book, and it's written like you and I we know the history of British social realism. So, or John Cassavetes. So there's going to be stuff that we already know. I
Mhm.
personally think it's still entertaining. It's kind of like a story of film, Mark Cousins documentary.
Sure.
I can rewatch that. That's like catnip for me. But it's really written for a mass audience. So if I wouldn't be intimidated, you don't have to watch 200 films to read the book or to understand the book, and you don't have to. It's a pretty light read, I think, too. It's lighter than I expected. So I'm
Yeah.
very happy with it. It's funny sometimes too. That was a surprise. I don't know if I'm funny, but the creators are funny. Ari Aster is funny. He's
Sure.
surprisingly funny. So yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
I can imagine a lot of potential readers, a lot of the audience for this book maybe just came in as fans of particular movies. Maybe didn't even know that they were all connected through this A24 thing. Or and this was really like the last 15, 16 years of
mhm,
popular cinema, especially here in America and in the West. This is kind of the cutting edge of what's happening artistically, creatively. Not the only thing, but there's this common core that this A24 phenomenon that kind of draws them all together. So I think for readers who maybe haven't been as immersed in the A24 scene, they'll learn a lot. They'll sort of see how
mhm,
the developments of the last decade and a half have kind of come together to create something that is, I think, now deserving of its place in the historical context. This is a significant event or series of events that's happened in the larger film culture of our own times, of recent memory. So we don't have to think about, oh, what wouldn't have been cool back there in the 60s in the French Nouvelle Vague or the Czech
right.
New Wave or the Japanese New Wave or whatever. Well, no, this is our time. This is our story. And I'm pretty excited to see it all pulled together in context, put together in a nicely packaged presentation, and just knowing that one of my good friends has really pulled this off here, and I'm very proud of you and very excited to see where this goes. I know you've got some publicity and some interviews and other folks you're going to be talking to as you get the word out about this, and yeah, maybe you'll even kind of come up to my neck of the woods up here in Western Michigan, or we'll find a chance to get together in Chicago, Ann Arbor, Detroit,
Absolutely.
the big cities. I'd definitely love to make the road trip and be part of whatever kind of events, whatever that is, book signings, appearances, interviews. Wish you all the best as you go ahead and roll out this labor of love and let people know what you've been up to these last couple of years as you finally get that edition in print in hand and out there into the real world.
Well, those trips out of my house are long overdue. I've spent too much time indoors the last couple of years, and yes, I in the summertime I will get up to your neck of the woods. I don't think I
Yes.
can bear it right now, but yeah,
No, I would discourage any active tourist business up in Michigan at this time of year, but it's lovely in the spring and summer for sure.
absolutely. Look forward to it.
All right, Aaron. Well, thanks for the time and thanks for giving us all this insight into your creative process. Wish you all the best, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks for having me. Take care, David.